Growing up, my twin brother and I were inseparable. From the moment we were born, we shared everything: our toys, our secrets, our dreams. We had our differences, of course, but they never got in the way. If there was one person in the world I could trust, it was him. Our bond was unshakable, or at least, that's what I believed. Our parents were always busy, leaving us alone most of the time. While other kids had strict rules and curfews, we had an empty house and endless freedom. It made us close in a way that most siblings couldn't understand. We had our own world, one where it was just the two of us against everything else. Even as we grew older, that never changed. Or so I thought. Then came her. She wasn't just another girl. She was different, special. The kind of person who could walk into a room and change the atmosphere without even trying. From the moment I met her, I knew she was the one. She made me feel alive in ways I never had before. Being with her felt effortless, like we had always been meant to find each other. I brought her into my world, into my family, introducing her to the person who meant the most to me, my twin. At first, everything was perfect. She fit right in, laughing at our jokes, sharing stories, becoming part of our bond. I had never been happier. But then, something shifted. It was small at first, barely noticeable. A glance that lingered too long. A fleeting touch that seemed too familiar. The way she laughed just a little harder at his jokes than she did at mine. It was nothing, I told myself. I was imagining things. My mind was playing tricks on me. But the feeling wouldn't go away. I started noticing how often they found themselves alone together, how comfortable they seemed. My brother had always been charming, always the one people gravitated toward. I had never been jealous of that before. But now, for the first time, I felt something bitter creeping in. I told myself it was ridiculous. He would never do that to me. She would never do that to me. One evening, we were all sitting together, the three of us, just like usual. The air was thick with something unspoken, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She was sitting close to me, but somehow, she felt far away. He, on the other hand, seemed too relaxed, too at ease. I tried to shake the feeling, to ignore the unease growing inside me. Then, for just a second, I caught it, an expression on his face, something subtle but unmistakable. A look of satisfaction. And in that moment, a horrible thought crossed my mind. What if I wasn't imagining it? What if something had already happened? I pushed the thought away. It was my twin. My own blood. There was no way. But deep down, something told me I had already lost something I would never get back. The night everything changed started like any other. The three of us together, laughing, talking, existing in the space we had all become so familiar with. But beneath the surface, something was different. I felt it in the way she avoided my eyes, in the way my brother seemed too comfortable, too sure of himself. It was like they were sharing a secret, something unspoken but undeniable. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overthinking, letting my imagination get the best of me. But doubt had already taken root, and once it was there, it refused to let go. Every small detail stood out. The way she leaned slightly closer to him when she spoke, the way his gaze lingered on her for just a second too long. It was all in my head, I repeated. It had to be. The night stretched on, and I felt more like an outsider in my own relationship. The air between us was thick, suffocating. Every laugh felt forced, every glance a puzzle I couldn't solve. I wanted to believe that nothing was wrong, but the feeling gnawed at me, relentless. Then, for the first time, I saw it clearly. The way his hand brushed against hers when he passed her a drink. The way she didn't pull away. The small, knowing smile that flickered between them. It was brief, barely noticeable. But for me, it was everything. My stomach twisted. A quiet rage began to build inside me, but I forced it down. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. I needed to be sure. I watched them closely, searching for any sign that I was wrong, that I was just seeing things. But the more I looked, the more obvious it became. They weren't careful anymore. Maybe they thought I wouldn't notice. Maybe they didn't care if I did. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to say something. I pulled her aside, my heart pounding. My voice was calm, steady, but inside, I was unraveling. Asked her if something was going on, if there was anything she needed to tell me. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Then she shook her head, forced a laugh, told me I was being ridiculous. That there was nothing. That I was imagining things. But her eyes said something else. I turned to my brother, searching for the truth in his face. He met my gaze without hesitation, without guilt. He didn't deny anything. He didn't try to explain. He just smirked. And in that moment I knew I had already lost. The weight of betrayal settled deep in my chest, but I refused to let it consume me. I needed proof, something undeniable. My mind raced through possibilities, but nothing made sense. How long had this been happening? How far had it gone? Had I been blind this entire time, trusting them while they made a fool out of me? That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, imagined the worst, felt the sting of their deception like a fresh wound. My brother, the person I trusted most. The one who was supposed to have my back, no matter what. And her, the woman I thought was mine, the one who had promised me love, loyalty. It was all a lie. By morning, my anger had turned cold. I wasn't going to sit back and let this happen. I needed answers. I watched them carefully, studying every interaction. Now that I was paying attention, the signs were everywhere. The way they stole glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The way she seemed nervous when he entered the room. The way he acted so unaffected, so completely at ease, like none of this mattered. I waited until the perfect moment. My brother had stepped outside to take a call, leaving her alone. She was sitting there, scrolling through her phone, pretending everything was fine. I sat across from her, my voice calm but firm. Tell me the truth. Her fingers tensed around her phone. What are you talking about? I exhaled slowly, refusing to let her play dumb. You and him. Her face paled, but she forced a laugh. You're being paranoid. I leaned forward. I saw the way you looked at him. The way he looked at you. For the first time, she couldn't meet my eyes. That was all I needed. I pressed on. How long? She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the fabric of her sweater. It wasn't supposed to happen. The words hit like a punch to the gut. My hands curled into fists, but I forced myself to stay still. So it did happen. Silence. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no excuse, no way to take it back. Before I could say another word, the door opened. My brother walked in, pausing when he saw us. His eyes flicked between us, reading the tension instantly. But instead of guilt, instead of regret, he smirked again. Like this was a game he had already won. And in that moment I realized he had never been sorry. He had never cared. He had taken everything from me, and he was proud of it. I thought confronting them would bring me closure, but it only made the betrayal cut deeper. There was no apology, no attempt to fix what had been broken. My brother didn't care about what he had done, and she was too ashamed to admit the truth out loud. I sat there, staring at them, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The two people I trusted most had shattered everything, and now, all that remained was the cold, bitter reality of what they had done. I could have screamed, demanded answers, forced them to explain themselves. But what would be the point? I already knew the truth. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, one they had made over and over again, behind my back. My brother leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me like he was waiting to see what I would do next. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't ashamed. In his eyes, this wasn't even a betrayal. It was just another moment where he came out on top. That realization burned more than anything else. He had never seen me as an equal, never truly cared about how his actions affected me. To him, I was just an obstacle, something in his way. And now that he had what he wanted, I no longer mattered. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for this to happen. The words were empty, meaningless. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. But it did. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. She could cry all she wanted, but it wouldn't change the fact that she had destroyed everything we had built together. I turned to my brother, waiting to see if he had anything to say. Some justification, some excuse. But he just smirked again, like he had already won. And maybe he had. Because in the end, I wasn't going to fight for someone who had never been mine to begin with. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I stood up, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of the betrayal settle. Then I walked away. Not because I was weak, but because they weren't worth it.